All right. So first and foremost, thank you for joining me on this MBA Admission Secrets to Success. We created this because there's been demand from folks who've been inquiring about our services to put together a series of webinars. We're going to put together two, and in this webinar series, the goal is to really be able to provide you with an overview of the whole MBA admissions process. We're going to do kind of like an overview from I wouldn't say 50,000 foot, I would say somewhere about 15,000, where we kind of dig deep into what it takes in terms of designing a profile, which you can imagine in terms of branding your profile for the MBA applications, basically assembling your application materials, submitting your application materials, and then finally making the decision and succeeding in terms of your MBA in business school. Now, as I said, it's a two-part series. We'll have our website there so you guys can come in at any time and check out our services. But more importantly, we're also going to have our email so you can email us any questions. And on the side over here in the chat, feel free to please ask any questions as you go through the process. All right. So without further ado, we got a lot to cover, which is why we divide into two, but we still have a lot to cover even in two-part webinar series. So let's get started. Let me give you a little bit of a background of myself. While I have not done an MBA degree, I have worked with, I can't even tell you how many MBA applicants. In fact, they are by far my favorite people to work with, at the risk of saying this for law school candidates, which I've worked with a lot of law school candidates, undergraduate candidates, graduate school candidates. I love working with MBA applicants because I feel that they have a lot more in terms of they're more introspective about what they want to do. I feel that MBA applicants also are very kind of career oriented and really laser focused in terms of why they want to do the MBA. And that really helps kind of create the ideas necessary to put the application materials together. So it really jazzes me up. Plus, I love the MBA essays for the different schools. They're a lot more inventive and interesting than some other graduate applications, which are much more boring. So I really love the process, but it is quite tedious and it can be very onerous in terms of just really following up and putting everything together. So let me give you a quick background of myself. Went to UCLA, did my bachelor's there, went to law school at Berkeley, and in the middle of that, went to Cambridge in England to do a master's in international relations. And then several years later, went back to Harvard where I took this picture to do a master's in public administration. It was a mid-career program. And in fact, what I ended up doing is doing a kind of mini MBA at the Kennedy School as part of my studies because it was so fluid in terms of the curriculum. And even took classes at the Harvard Business School as well, which we were allowed to do as Kennedy School students. Now, I founded Right Track in 2008 and successfully have helped hundreds of MBA applicants from literally around the world. I can't even tell you how many different countries we've represented to get into programs, again, in many different countries, from Spain, France, Italy, England, and of course, our main focus in the United States. So the top programs, you can imagine what those are, anywhere from WHS, Wharton, Harvard, Stanford, into Columbia, NYU, you name it, Cornell, UCLA, Anderson, USC, Marshall, and all the different MBA programs. And not just the MBA programs as in just a 2-year program, but we've also done a lot of executive MBA programs, a lot of part-time programs as well. All right. So let's kind of quickly talk about what are the common pain points for MBA applicants. And excuse me, my voice, I have no idea. It's kind of coming and going. So bear with me if I try to clear my throat. All right. So these are some of the main pain points that we have seen applicants suffer from consistently over and over again. And this is what we try to course correct for you in terms of our services and really what we're going to try to cover over the course of this webinar, right? So one of the main pain points, not articulating exactly why you want to be able to apply or use an MBA for your short, medium, and long-term career goals. So many people are like, I want to do an MBA, but why? Well, I want to further my career, but how? And then they get stumped. Well, I want to continue working where I'm working. Okay, but it sounds like when you talk to me that you have aspirations to do other stuff as well. Well, yeah, and maybe, and it just becomes a zoo. And if you're not clear on that, and we'll talk about this, you're going to lose them from the jump, because that theme, that narrative needs to continue throughout. Confusion about the business school admissions process, and when to get started. Should I get started over the summer? Should I get started in the fall? Should I get started in the winter? Right? Am I applying to 1 school, 5 schools, 10 schools? Am I applying as an executive? I'm applying as part-time, right? Am I applying to 1 school, 5 schools, 10 schools, right? So all of that goes into it, and that goes into the next pain point, which is, again, figuring out what combination of schools and which round to apply to. Do you apply round 1, round 2, round 3, even round 4, right? For some of the schools, what's the mechanism? Should you try to push some of the schools that are let's call them your lower target and your safety schools to later rounds? Should you apply all of them in round 1? How do you balance it? How do you get those letters of recommendation so that you don't kind of exhaust them by applying to too many schools? All those kind of questions. Another question is, which is, I think, probably one of the most prevailing and important questions, which is the profile question. How do you really kind of focus on, in terms of your story and designing your profile? How do you build that up, right? How do you create that brand? And we're going to talk about that extensively today, right? Thinking about how do you design and perfect the resume? How do you create those compelling statements, those essays, those MBA essays, right? To really stand out. And that's super, super important. And then the reality, how do you balance? And I can't even tell you how many of our clients have had to deal with this. How do you effectively balance your work priorities with your personal commitments, right? While still putting together your application, seeking letters of recommendation, doing the GRE or the GMAT, right? Putting all that stuff together, designing your CV, doing it in a time where you can fit all of this within one of the given rounds, right? And a given round could start, like, let's say round 1 starts around August and ends in what? End of October. And then round 2, let's say for most people, starts September. They start thinking about it and they submit by December, sometimes beginning of January. Round 3, sometime they think about it sometime in December and submit round 3 around February, March, right? So you have around 3-month windows to complete each round. Obviously, you can start round 2 as early as the summer and to still apply within round 2. But again, like, how do you do all of this? How do you balance it all, right? And that's really where we come in as a company. We help you balance it all, follow up with the deadlines, and make sure that you meet those rounds. And again, we're going to talk a little bit about that. And please ask any questions you have as we go through this, especially about some of those kind of pain points that you may have as you go through the process. All right. Let's talk a little bit about the business school landscape, right? In terms of just general overview. So I'm going to quickly kind of go through these. Don't want to spend too much time on them. But why do you want to go and do an MBA, right? What the hell are you going to be paying for? And it's a lot of money. I never forget. I had a client who was applying to the fellows program at MIT. And I remember it's a 1-year program, just literally a 1-year program. That's it. And it was $175,000 that this person had to pay out of pocket, which is wild. That is 1 year. So typically somebody's applying to a fellows program, they've got quite a lot of credentials. If they got quite a lot of credentials and they're applying to an MIT program at Sloan, right, for a 1-year program, they're probably making what, 150, 200, 225. So they're foregoing that and paying a 175 on top of it. So they're literally paying $400,000. Is it worth it, right? So you really want to ask yourself, is the financial, in terms of the upside, is it worth it? And if it is, what job do you expect to get afterwards, and how much of a bump in salary? Because that's going to be obviously something to think about in terms of opportunity costs versus a downstream benefit. You've got the better career opportunities that will probably, you hope, will come from that. So you kind of want to line it up from that perspective. A stepping stone to higher management, maybe becoming your own boss in terms of entrepreneurship. Think about the risk with that too. You're now in the whole 175. You forewent 200, 225,000 in terms of your salary. Now you're doing a startup where you're making literally peanuts. Is it worth it? How does it kind of all come together? An MBA helps people pivot into a new career. I was focused on aerospace. Now I want to do a different type of X, in engineering. I was focused on marketing. Now I'm thinking about shifting over to sales, whatever it is, right? So it allows you to kind of pivot in terms of your career, which could be a huge bonus. Incubating an idea, building a team to develop an innovative idea. I can't even tell you how many people I saw when I was at Harvard who were coming together and formed companies, some of which succeeded, some of which failed, miserably. But at least you went through the process and you formed a team while you were there, and you allowed you to incubate ideas. Obviously, at MIT Sloan, one of the advantages, you've got the access to the Media Lab, which has all kinds of crazy innovations. But a lot of schools really try to push forward that. Networking opportunities, building up your own credibility by having the MBA. Obviously, for a lot of people who are doing the 2-year program, especially if they're like 23, 24, typically about 24, 25, 26, and they were in consulting, it's kind of like they push you towards that goal, right? You do 2 years of consulting, or if you're working at an investment bank, 2 years later, they kind of push you towards getting an MBA or pivoting it out of the career completely. And so you've got that 2-year kind of almost like vacation gap. And then you kind of come back at a higher level, senior associate or what have you, right? You've got the global credential recognition. Obviously, especially if you go to one of those global MBA programs, Columbia, UPenn, obviously Harvard, especially the ones that have, like, or University of Chicago, that have those global campuses, that also gives you access to a global network. In Europe, INSEAD, it's probably got the biggest alumni community globally. So you can think about that. Personal development. So it's not just in terms of your own professional development, but you develop a lot of personal skills that come with it. Really double downing on your EQ, your speaking skills, your ability to really kind of lead within the confine, the guardrails of an MBA program, right? And making a lot of new friends. I even put there finding a spouse. A lot of people, it turns out, go to MBA programs so they can get married. Don't look at me. But that's what some people have gone on to do as well. Now, here's a quick pre-MBA industry sample size for an HBS class. So 15% came from consulting, 9% from consumer goods, retail, e-commerce, financial services, 12%, biotech, 7%, manufacturing, 12%, media, 3%, military 4%, services 4%, technology 12%, private equity 16%. What's interesting there is that if you come from those unorthodox backgrounds, there's a risk reward, right? The risk is you're coming from an unorthodox background, but the reward is, and so it's risky because you're not sure if they're going to recognize it or appreciate it, but the reward is that you really stand out. Like if someone was in media and entertainment or travel and tried to do an MBA program, they really are going to stand out versus the 15% that are coming from consulting or VCs, right? So just something to think about in terms of kind of how you shape your profile. And I remember a great story of a former client who had basically was in consulting, but then shifted over to manufacturing industry and energy. But within that, he was in mining, which I don't even know if you would say within manufacturing industry and energy. He was within mining. And specifically, like certain types of hydrocarbons that was so unique that his profile really stood out. And he literally designed his profile around that goal. He left whatever his former job was just to do that so he could be a great MBA candidate, and ended up getting into one of the top MBA programs. Now, there's about 500 accredited business schools in the United States, a hell of a lot of business schools. Probably there's about 500 accredited ones internationally, total. I don't know, maybe I'm being snobby, but there are probably 500 internationally, maybe, but in the US there's about 500, of which about 50 are something to speak about, unless you're trying to do an MBA program in some small state school just so that you can learn, but you better make it cost effective because it's not going to help you get a job if you just have an MBA from a no-name school and you try to figure that out. So I would say, obviously, the bigger name, the better, because you have, as I said, in terms of all of this, you've got the network, you've got the credibility, you've got the global recognition, you've got the opportunities to incubate ideas with really well-renowned professors. You have the opportunity to, up your salary. So that's something you want to think about when you're selecting schools, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit. There's about 40,000 applicants in 2024, more expected in 2025. It is a very fluid degree. There's no prerequisites. Anybody and their mother can apply for an MBA program, literally. So it just depends on how your profile is designed to allow you to stand out. So the barrier to entry is not like a medical school or dental school. We have to take all these prerequisites and pre-med courses. The average tuition $63,000. As I said, for some of the programs, it's wild. Like that 1 year MBA at the Sloan's Fellow program, 175 is just crazy for me to think about. But the idea is I assume somebody leaves that program and doubles their salary, they can pay that back fairly quickly. We got a question from Anna B. I want to make sure that I answer that. I've always wondered if an MBA, I need to have previous experience or if I can apply right out of college. What do you think? So great question. Very, very, very few people are able to get an MBA program without experience. Very few. If you know anybody, they're unicorns. Because the idea of an MBA program is that they want people to come in there with substantial experience. Even when I say substantial, I mean like 2-3 years of experience at least, so you can add value to the classroom discussion. So you have some semblance of what you want to do afterwards. You're not kind of floundering trying to figure it out. And so that, I think, is an important factor in thinking through, when to apply for an MBA. So I would highly advise that you apply for an MBA with at least 1, 2, 3 years of experience. Why? One, you have some money in savings, so that you're not going in there and just taking out loans straight from the jump. 2, you've got experience, so you have a little bit more clarity in terms of which career trajectory you want. 3, you add value to the classroom and you're a little bit older, so you don't feel like you're completely out to lunch, when the average age for most MBA programs is about 25, 26 for the 2-year programs. So you have something to add value to the classroom. That's just 3 things I can think off the top of my head as to why you wouldn't want to go straight out of undergrad. So I definitely would recommend at least 2 years experience. So you graduate, let's say 2025 July, take that 2 years off and basically apply, let's say 2026, and then matriculate 2027 at a minimum. Because even then, you're only going to be applying with 1 year of experience, right? Only 1 year. So you want to basically, you want to have at least, and you're going to basically tell them, look, I'm applying with 1 year of experience, but by the time I matriculate, I'll have 2 years. Ideally, you have 2 years of experience. By the time you matriculate, you'll have 3 years. That really is the sweet spot, and that's what the schools are going to be looking for. All right? Now, we kind of went through what are the advantages of, why do an MBA, so that you know what you're paying for. But here are some quick questions I want you to kind of think about when, considering and preparing for an MBA program. Why do I want to pursue an MBA program or business school in general? What other graduate programs? A master's in finance, a master's in public policy, a master's in social work, a master's in entrepreneurship. That may have nothing to do with an MBA, that you may be more qualified for or more akin in terms of what you want to do. What's the market look like? Is it worth it to forego, as I said, 2 years of income in some cases, which could be significant for people that have, 4 years of experience, 3-4 years of experience, and have to take 2 years off. Are you ready to take on significant debt? Do you have the patience to study for 2 years now that you've built this momentum in terms of your career? How can I be sure that you won't be made redundant with AI, especially if you're misreading the market? Like, let's say you get into an area of accounting or finance, which suddenly starts to become automated through all kinds of AI tools. And then you're like, wow, what the hell did I just do to myself? Even though I paid for this MBA program, I am now completely redundant, because at the end of the day, my job is not safe. It's not secure because it was automated, right? So you want to think about that. And then I want you to really think about this, because it's going to be part of your decision-making process. What are the hard and soft skills that you will develop so that you can become a standout for an MBA program? If you think you have all the hard skills and the soft skills, then why the hell are you applying? If you don't, and you're like, I see these as knowledge gaps, literally, then I think you're well on your way to say, okay, I see these as knowledge gaps. I'm humble enough to admit these gaps. And that's what I'm going to write about in the essay, because some schools will say, why now? Why you? Why us? Right? Why now at this juncture in your career? Why you? Why we should consider you as an applicant? And then why us? Why are you considering us as the best school for you in terms of your trajectory? So kind of want to make sure that you answer those questions in terms of your application. All right. These are some quick tips and things to think about as you go through the process, actions to take, real actions. I want you to fine tune your core competencies through professional pursuits. So you want to have certain core competencies, which is why I told Anna to take some time off so that you can earn some skill sets, is that you want to kind of focus on those core competencies while developing some and recognizing that there's going to be others that you can develop. So you want to make sure that you're adding value to the class by having some core competencies that you can add in there, right? You want to research the programs and the market trends, obviously, AI and so forth, and which area is really kind of blowing up. Map out your career trajectory, because that question, why you, why us, why now, right? Or I said I flipped around, but the idea is, again, why now, why us, why you? Because at the end of the day, they really want to make sure that you are on the right path, and the MBA is going to supercharge your trajectory. If you can't articulate why you want to do an MBA now and how it's going to help your future, it will literally unearth and really undermine your application from the jump. If you can't answer that, you're going to get screwed. I know this for a fact from previous people who came to us after they had applied and they got dinged the year before. That was one of the things that we were able to figure out, is they did not have an articulate goal, line, articulate trajectory, articulate narrative that really made them look schizophrenic in front of the admissions committees. I would seek advice from mentors and supervisors, especially those that have had MBA, got MBA programs. Gain 2 years of experience, like a practical experience, like I told Anna. Audit business school classes. Let's say you guys live in New York, Chicago, Boston, wherever. Go into the school and just say, I would love to audit a class, any class. Talk to the professor, allow them to do that, and by doing that, you will be able to get a sense of what the business class are about. Like when I was at Harvard, I had to really really learn quickly the case study methodology and be confident enough to answer those questions, even as someone who doesn't have super strong business acumen naturally. As a lawyer, as a policy guy, my business acumen is okay. And so I had to really learn to build the confidence to be able to answer and be involved in those case study types of questions and approach to analyzing those case studies in terms of building up my own business acumen at Harvard Business School. And a lot of business schools do that as well. Network with MBA students and alum. I told you to network with your mentor and supervisor, but also with MBA students, because the names of the people you capture. Plus, if you audit a class, you can include that as to why that school, like I answered the why us, that school makes sense for you. I went to Stanford. I checked out this class. I love the way that Professor Bob was, teaching on the area of entrepreneurship and leadership development. I specifically spoke with student, Sarah, class of 2026, and Linda, class of 2027, about how great the MBA program is, blah, 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 right? And then I would say write out a SWOT analysis of your candidacy, right? Which I think is super important in terms of thinking through what are the strengths that you already have, what are the weaknesses that you really need to minimize, what are the opportunities you need to manage, and what are the threats that you really need to mitigate, and figure those out to really kind of best put yourself in a position to get into the MBA programs that you really want. And that's something that we do. We have something called MBA app, which is MBA admissions assessment program, where we do a SWOT analysis and say, you've got great strengths and experiences in leadership and in finance and X. You've got weaknesses because you really don't have much experience in volunteer work or whatever else. You've got these great opportunities that you can take this crash course to really up your GMAT, but you've got these threats because your profile is very similar to a bunch of other people in terms of just typecast. Like, let's say that thing where we said 16% VC, 15% consulting. So that is a threat because there's going to be a bunch of people applying from that. So how do we really make you stand out? And maybe that's applying round 1 versus round 2 or 3, right? So just some things to kind of think about as you go through the preparing for the business school process. It is not a joke. Don't take it lightly, and don't just follow what everyone's telling you. You want to make sure that you're doing the right thing and you're doing an MBA for the right reasons, right? That's super, super important from that perspective. All right. Now let's start preparing your profile. What we really kind of came down to is there are these kind of core qualities that what business school really look for in candidates. This is time and time again, we've found that this is something that's very, very important for business schools. They want candidates who are well-rounded, both with IQ, probably, honestly, I know it's going to sound bananas, but less IQ. They don't care. Like if you look at the GPA requirement for a business school, it's about, for Harvard, maybe 3.5, 3.6 for Harvard Business School. For Harvard Law School, it's like 3.9. Like a GPA for law school is infinitely more important than is for an MBA program. And that's because they don't care as much about the IQ, pure academics, raw academics. They care more about what you've done, the experience you gain. Again, I go back to what Anna asked. Can I go straight out of undergrad? No, because in the end of the day, they really want you to have developed strong EQ skills, leadership skills, team working skills, because that's something that they really double down on in terms of your applications and what they look for. So these are the core qualities. If I broke down EQ and IQ, especially the EQ, these are the core 5 qualities that they look for in candidates. All right. Folks that are collaborative, teamwork and leadership, which you can obviously exhibit in work, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. Creativity, being an out-of-the-box thinker, thinking about things from multidisciplinary perspective. You guys may be familiar with design thinking at Stanford. That is not necessarily tied to GSB, but is on the main campus. I want to almost say that Stanford has literally a graduate program on design thinking. And it's fantastic because that's really what is going to allow us to remain relevant from AI, because AI may not necessarily know how to approach a problem from a multidisciplinary perspective, multidimensional perspective. We can think of problems through a design thinking lens, and that comes from creative thinking, okay? Super important. It's something you really want the schools to feel that you have. A sense of compassion, very, very important. Obviously for business school, like let's say I always used to clown on HBS, and I'm sure HBS folks used to clown on the Kennedy School students because we were, heart bleeds for, public service and community. And we always thought the HBS folks were a lot more money grubbing and capitalistic. But at the end of the day, schools really want students who also have a kind heart and want to bring that into the business sense. And I think, look, millennials and Gen Zs are pushing us to be that way. Folks, I think I'm a Gen X. And they want to think about like, what are we doing to give back in terms of impact, whether it's DEI in terms of the people they hire, or whether what you're doing for the community in terms of CSR, corporate social responsibility, and what you're doing in general to give back, plus mental health, plus balancing life and all that kind of stuff. So I think a sense of compassion is very important, which you exhibit through volunteer and community service. A sense of curiosity, which is where we talk about IQ in there, because you have this desire, this insatiable thirst to learn about different things and having an open-minded perspective about different people around you. And that comes from a sense of curiosity and the level of commitment. They don't want people to start the MBA program and quit after a semester or two. They want you to have the wherewithal to go the distance and finish it, but also have strong work ethic and be driven, because once you graduate, they want you to come back and be a success. Why? So that you can make more money and carry the flag of the school behind them. Why make more money? So that you can be a great benefactor to the school and give back in terms of alum, and that the school feels a sense of pride in having enabled you, facilitated your career trajectory. And now that you're a success, you can give back to the school and they can hold your picture up high, knowing that you're an alum of that school. So I want you to keep these things in mind, these 5 C's: collaborative, creative, compassionate, curious, and committed, because these are the kind of qualities, these are the buckets that you want to fulfill as you design and develop your profile and how you lead in terms of your profile authentically, okay? These are the kind of things that allow you to kind of live your life experiences in terms of those key qualities that we just spoke about, right? So I like to call it living your story. Now, if you're applying today, for round 1 or round 2, you're not going to have too much time to develop your story. But if you decide to punt and apply next year or the year after and so forth, these are some very, very important things I want you to think about in terms of how to develop your personal brand in your story. What do I mean by personal brand? The easiest way to think about it is how Jeff Bezos said it. He said, it's what people say about you when you're not in the room, right? It's the brand. It's what you carry. It's what you stand for. So it's core values that you stand for, right? And that is your personal brand. And how do you live it? You could live it in terms of all these different areas. So we'll quickly go through this. Academic, you want to emphasize those core qualities that the school looks for: analytical, quantitative, strong communication skills. Spend time living your story in terms of the life experiences that you have. Embrace those challenges that you face. Talk about those hardships you've overcome. Write them all out, because those are going to really feed into your MBA essays. They will feature in somewhere in there. And if it's not just the essays, it'll be in your resume. And if it's not in the resume, it'll be in the interview, okay? Personal development, what have you done about your own personal development, certifications that you've gathered, public speaking, civic engagement, right? Speaking about civic engagement, we've got volunteer activities, which really kind of harnesses and showcases that sense of compassion, right? the volunteer, the collaborative, individualism that you have, right? That we talked about. Within personal development, we could talk about the level of curiosity that you have. Again, under life experiences, we talk about that concept of compassion. Under academics, we talked about curiosity. Extracurriculars, in terms of what you've done for professional interest groups or identity groups, things that you did in undergrad or afterwards. They really love that. They really want to see somebody who's not just dedicated to their job, but is what did we say? Well-rounded individual. Well-rounded. They don't want just folks that are working super hard and that's it. And they don't want people that are just coasting through life and that's it. They need someone who's well-rounded, that has these qualities and exhibits it in there's different ways that they've lived, right? And then you obviously have your professional experience, which always is probably by far and away the most important of all these aspects in terms of full-time work, part-time work, the leadership you exhibited, the strategic thinking, the time management you've reflected, organizational skills that you have, the impact that your job has had on you and on others are all very, very, very important. Okay. So when I've told you about those 5 core qualities in terms of helping you build your profession, your personal brand, here is how you would demonstrate it in these areas: academics, extracurriculars, life experiences, volunteer activities, personal development, professional experiences, or professional development. And when I say life experiences, you're going to be like, I still don't get it. The idea, and I love saying this to people, and I don't think it's really as applicable to you guys because, again, you had life experiences. You're in your 20s versus people that we help that are college students. But I always say, if you're Netflix and chilling, if you're at home and gaming, life's passing you by. You don't know what's happening out there. You're not engaged with the world. And because of that, you don't have a lot of life experiences to talk about. But if you're traveling extensively, if you're volunteering extensively, if you're putting yourself in the line of fire and taking big risks, you're going to have failures and you're going to have successes. And those are the key things that we can write about, because what we're asking you to do is spending time living your story. What you are living today, you will write about tomorrow. That is a very, very important and fundamental concept that we really hone on and harness at Right Track Admissions. Hence our motto: discover your story, get admitted. All right. Now, let's quickly go through the application components themselves, right? We'll quickly, there's no set order, but let's think about it this way. We've got selecting the schools and the programs. And then within that, I also want you to think about the rounds. So it's not just the programs, but the rounds as well, and that you're applying for. When I say selecting programs, I mean EMBA, MBA, part-time MBA, right? Those different types of opportunities. Figure out whether you're going to take the GMAT or the GRE, collecting your transcripts and getting them verified, especially if you're international, gathering and starting to put together your core materials, right? The resume, addendums, optional statements, and so forth. Figuring out how you're going to pay for business school. Is your employer going to fund you? Do you have savings? Are you ready to take out loans? Are there any scholarships that you can attain? Letters of recommendation, figuring out who's going to be your recommender, super important for business school. School-specific applications and the submissions process. So that's, the school-specific essays for the different programs, and then the interview prep itself and getting ready for that. So these are the different components for the MBA program. And we're going to try to go through these, at least most of them, over the course of this webinar series. All right. Let's start with, and I think we talked about that, selecting the programs, right? Let's quickly think about the different program opportunities. We've got the full-time MBA, right? I don't want to get too bogged down in all the nitty-gritty of what each one is. You can also do the research yourself. But you've got the full-time 1 year. We talked about the Sloan's Fellow. We got the more popular 2 year, right? Which is about 60% of applicants, 3 years of work experience. Best opportunities for experiential learning. Why? Because you get those summers where you can really double down and kind of pave your career track. So that's very, very important. And obviously it's the best opportunity for networking because you're full-time and you're on campus for 2 years. So you really develop with your class. So you really kind of create that congeniality, that kind of connection with your peers, and they will end up becoming investors in your company, employees, co-founders, what have you, right? You've got the part-time MBA, which is again a 2+ year program. It's self-paced. I think one of the main ones I've really helped a lot of clients with was NYU, super popular. I want to say they have an outrageous number of MBA part-time students. Like, I'm going to say 2,000, but that sounds almost ludicrous. But it's a very, very high number of students that they have It's more flexible. You can work full time, so it basically pays itself off. And what you're learning during the day as a full-time employee, you're applying at night in the classroom in terms of your class discussions. You're bringing that to the class discussion, and vice versa. What you're learning in class, the discussions, you're applying it immediately in terms of work. But a part-time MBA, I really would say I would shirk from it if you have, I said, with 1 to 3 years of experience, I would say at a minimum. I think you would do a part-time MBA if you're later on in your career, which also then leads to the executive MBA program, which again is part-time, but it's less self-paced. It's really more rigid. Every weekend you come in for classes, or at the end of each month, or every 6 weeks, you come in for a couple of weeks, what have you. It's very global. So again, a lot of folks do it who are at INSEAD, Chicago Booth, UPenn, Columbia, have a very, very good executive MBA programs. And then you've got these certificate programs, these executive education programs, which are just, they're not master's degree level, but they offer opportunity for folks who are in the space, who really want to kind of fine tune and upskill in a very niche area. But they're not going to get a degree out of it. But they can really kind of focus, especially for people who are really seasoned. And as I said, they're 10 years of experience, right? But bang for the buck, I think it's not worth it. Spending $20,000 for a 3-week course just to say that you were at Harvard, even though you don't have a Harvard credential, I would say is not worth it. If that's the only way you can, get involved, okay. But I would not really recommend it. I would recommend one of the degree programs, because that's really where you earn your keep, and you really do have that strong network and that learning opportunity that takes more than just a couple of weeks to do, right? And just getting a paper certificate, okay? In terms of choosing the schools, guys, here are some really important factors I want you to think about from that perspective. The location. Do you want to be in a rural area like Johnson, Cornell, or do you want to be in the city like, NYU, Stern, right? Obviously that matters. Like if you, let's say, go to Haas at Berkeley, but your goal is to really be in New York working in finance, and you got into NYU, and even though NYU may not be as ranked as high as Berkeley, maybe it's better to go to NYU because you've got that immediate network right there. You've got the job opportunities right outside your door, right? The size, HBS, almost 1,000 students versus GSB, which is I think 300 students. The reputation, top 10, mid-tier. Obviously, most people don't have a choice in that. Obviously, if they have the credentials, they go predominantly for the higher schools. Concentration, some schools are great at finance like Wharton, entrepreneurship like, I would say, like Stanford, economics like Chicago, right? Resources, do they have student treks? Do they have internship opportunities? What kind of mentorship do they get from professors and so forth? And within the school, and we talk about career development down there, that's also part of resources in terms of job placement rates, earning potential and stuff like that. But also, some schools have really strong career development departments, some don't. So that's something to consider. The tuition, how expensive it is. A lot of the top tier schools are going to be super expensive regardless. Some of the lower tier schools are not going to be as expensive. So it really depends on what you want to get out of it. The campus vibe, again, if you want to be at NYU and in the city, is it diverse? Is a lot of cool student organizations? How's the social life, and so on and so forth? The faculty, the level of expertise, I would say, are they industry leaders? Are they like the best in class in terms of what they do? Are they practitioners and are they professors, right? I think that's very important. How accessible are they? Like, do they only come into school to teach for one day and then they bounce for the whole week so you can't access them? Or are they permanently there on campus during the course of a given semester? How strong is the alumni network? Super important, right? For people in different cities, in different states, regions, and internationally. I think that's very, very important. You go to Vanderbilt or Rice, or is it Rice or Jones, I think, out in Texas, right? Maybe their alumni network sucks if you go to England or you go to France or you work in India or the Middle East, right? They just don't have a great network. So it's not worth it maybe, versus a school that may not be as great in New York or in Los Angeles, but still has a great, network internationally, maybe. So that's something to kind of consider from that perspective in choosing the right business school. I quickly want to say this to you guys, because I think this is important. How not to pick the right business school, right? If you focus only on HBS or bust, I'm only going to go to Harvard. That's it. Well, you don't get in, what happens? Now you've got to wait another year to reapply. So really diversify. We're going to talk a little bit more about that down there. Not visiting or researching the campus, at least taking a virtual tour. I think that's very, very important that you do some diligence about the school, like really a deep dive. Apply only to certain constitutions or professors. I want to go to Columbia because there's a professor in finance. What happens if the professor takes a sabbatical? What happens if the professor leaves that school? What happens if they retire, right? And so you got to the school, professor's not there, why'd you end up going? Attend only for financial aid. Let's say you get into a lower tier school, like Jones. Actually, Jones is a great school, but let's say a lower tier business school like in Pepperdine, right? And you got a full ride, but then you also got into Anderson, UCLA, or you got into Berkeley, or you got into Stanford, right? With zero money. Obviously, from my perspective, bite the bullet, take the L, take all that financial loss, because it's going to double and triple for you down the road in terms of network and job opportunities. Following others like family or friends. Oh, my brother went there, my father went there. Yes, I get legacy, but they are not you. So you may be going there for completely different reasons that don't bode with what you want out of a business school, but boded well for what they wanted, right? So really kind of carve your own path. And then not diversifying. And this, I kind of have it here. And this is like a 3-part thing right here, right? The number of applications versus the percentage of admission. Reach schools are WHS across the board, almost always, Wharton, Harvard, Stanford. Target schools, again, depends really on your credentials and your profile. How good is your GMAT? How good is your GRE score, right? So you would have high targets, medium targets, low targets. High targets could be like Columbia, NYU, right? Maybe Haas. Medium targets could be like UCLA, USC, Marshall. Low targets could be maybe like Georgetown. Safety schools could be like Pepperdine, and then the whole litany of state schools and so forth, right? So just something to kind of think about, and you want to diversify. I would say reach schools should be about, total number of reach schools should be about 2 or 3, maybe 4 to 6 target schools and 2 to 3 safety schools, but really depends. Maybe you're like, I don't care. I'll never do an MBA if it's a safety school. I only want target and reach, so be it. But if you really want an MBA program, then, obviously diversify. Have your safeties, your target, and your reach schools. In terms of 0 to 15% chance of admission, 15 to 40, and 40 to 100% chance of admission. Obviously, this really doesn't exist because there's no 100% guarantee, but you get the point. All right. Again, guys, please ask any questions. I know I'm going through a hell of a lot of material, but this is based on 16 years of experience doing this. And I feel extremely confident that these are the core things you really want to be thinking about in terms of an MBA program, because we've done it so many times with a lot of great success. And these are the kind of things that we want to think about for our clients and for you. This is something that we put together. We call it the Right Track Selection and Tracking Oracle. I don't know. It sounds like a mouthful, but you get the point. We have all the MBA programs there. We have where they are located, city, state, how long each one is, when they are, why you want to go there. Maybe Stanford is for name and prestige as your number one reason. Your second reason is alumni support. And the third reason is entrepreneurship. Like we said, it's one of the most important for entrepreneurship. What is a dominant industry? Financial, and the number of hires within finance, 32%. And you create your own kind of spreadsheet. We have one like this. It's multi-page. We really kind of made it into a science to help you pretty much figure out what are the schools that you should be considering. And we kind of really broadened it here for a lot of the international ones as well. So not just the US schools, right? And you want to think about the competition, application pool, class diversity, employment, the cost of it. These are just some of the many factors that you should be considering when selecting the MBA programs, right? But we have something like this. And in fact, what we want to do is give you the first page of this crazy oracle that we've put together over 16 years as a freebie for basically being part of these 2-part webinar series. So please stick around for the second webinar and you'll qualify for an opportunity to get this awesome Oracle checklist, not checklist, but really it's a tracking tool for you to figure out the schools that we were speaking about over here. All right. Quickly, let's go through this. I don't like usually spending a lot of time on standardized testing because I have massive PTSD. I'm the kind of guy that took the SAT 3 times and did progressively better, basic progressively better, but had a very low chance of getting into a top undergraduate school. I took the LSAT 3 times, did progressively worse, but still was able to get into Berkeley. I took the GRE to apply to graduate programs and did just marginally better over the 2 times I took it. So I hate taking standardized tests, but I'm going to put this for you so that you guys get a sense. Nothing here is sexy and new. You guys can literally chat GPT this and figure out what's the difference between the GMAT and the GRE. We did our due diligence for you. Here are the key differences and where you can go. Make sure to, I wouldn't even rely on chat GPT, to be honest with you. I would just go to their core websites. I think GRE's ets.org or something to that effect. And the GMAT is, I think, GMAC. And you can figure out where, what are the main reasons or how do you take it and all that kind of good stuff in terms of the key things. But anyway, to me, and from what I've seen, even though a lot of schools, 90% of MBA programs accept the GRE, if you had a choice between the GRE and the GMAT, and you're getting kind of equal scores between the two, I would take the GMAT over the GRE. If you're tanking the GMAT, then, and you're doing well in the GRE, take the GRE. But if you're getting them about the same, then definitely I would say take the GMAT because it's old, tried, tested, and it's really only for MBA programs, the GREs across the board. The GMAT is longer than the GRE. The sections, the GMAT one, again, is kind of like they take you down these rabbit holes. I guess the GRE is the same. But if you really start screwing up in the beginning, it sends you down a rabbit hole where you really can't get an exceptionally high score. So you really want to score well from the beginning of the test so that it can take you across the goal line. Obviously, a great GMAT score is 700 plus. A great GRE score is, I think, what is it? I think it's out of 320, 160 total. No, it's 170 total, I want to say. If it's 170 total, then you want to get a 320 out of 340, something in that range. Obviously, if it's a 320 total, then you want to get like a 305 total out of it. So those are kind of like your dream scores. You can take it year round. It's almost all digital. You can skip questions and so forth. For HBS classes, 29% took the GRE, 71 took the GMAT, which is why I still believe GMAT is the preferred exam. And if you get them, I think if you had 2 clients exactly the same, 2 candidates exactly the same, one took the GRE, one took the GMAT, and they both have comparable scores, they will take the GMAT candidate over the GRE. Don't quote me on that, but that's really from what my research is telling me is the way it really happens in the admissions process. All right, let's quickly, I know we're kind of closing in on our time for 1 hour, but let's quickly kind of go through the resume structure. And let's start here. Brainstorm everything that you've done in university and as a professional. Brainstorm it all down. Put it all down. I don't really have to tell you what to include in a resume because there's no way in hell you got the job that you have as we speak without having a resume of some sort. So I'm sure you have a resume, but let's just say to make it more an MBA resume, write everything down so that you can make sure you're not missing anything. List those things out and that make you stand out, not just the academic, but the leadership, the accolades, the accomplishments, the credentials, the certificates that really make you stand out, and note them all down. Really about those key qualities that we talked about, those things that MBA programs want, to take initiative, right? To have a strong sense of compassion, that creativity, that sense of innovation, within that curiosity and that creativity, right? Analytical thinking, again, that comes from curiosity. Leadership, that comes from collaboration, right? And then we talked about those other ones, a sense of commitment, right? And the other key qualities within the 5 C's. And then divide it up like that. Professional experience, education activities, volunteer experiences, activities in general that don't have a home that you want to kind of still put in there that are relevant, your interests and skills, and then other sections you can include publications, which are not as important for an MBA program, but you can still put them in there if you have quite a few, certificates, licenses, speaking engagements. Now, you have the choice. If you're like 15 years out, then I would probably put education after activities. If you are like 3 years out, I would lead actually with education, then professional, then volunteer. But it really depends on where you kind of lie in terms of your level of experience and how many years out from your studies you are. All right. So those are some things to really think about in terms of structure. I do want to kind of emphasize teamwork and impact and make sure that you have measurable results. Don't just tell me your responsibilities. Make sure they have measurable results where you move the needle, right? Make sure you emphasize impact, where you really had a significant impact within the organization you worked for. All right. Financial aid. Let's quickly talk through this. You got the free funding, not a lot of it. I guess personal savings could be considered. Family support could be considered, as in you don't have to repay it back. A lot of schools, not a lot, I lied, excuse me. Some of the schools give fellowships and scholarships, especially if you're an exceptional candidate. I know they do this at Stanford, at Harvard, at Wharton. So something to think about, but don't count on it because they're very, very few and far between. Company sponsorships, especially if you're a standout employee and they want you to come back, that's a big deal. So you want to, obviously earn your keep and get great credentials so that you can get that. You can get funding from private organizations, assistantships. Maybe there's private orgs like a Coca-Cola scholarship, HP scholarship, and maybe there's strings attached. They want you to come back. Maybe those are the requirements. Company sponsorships, they definitely want you to come back, right? Unless you bail out of it, but then wherever you bail to go, you better either pay it back or wherever you're going, have that company pay them back. You've got the need-based and the private loans, subsidized and unsubsidized, as in those interests are accruing day one, that's unsubsidized, or accruing after you graduate, that's subsidized, as far as I know. Not an expert on financial aid, but something to consider. I don't have many MBA applicants, clients that we've worked with that come to me and constantly drill me on financial aid. They know it's going to be expensive and they're ready to take the L, right? But something to kind of consider. Summer work, obviously you get during the summers, hopefully you get paid. You can use that to pay off your debt. Negotiating funding, you got into Stanford and Wharton. You told Stanford, hey, Stanford, we got, I got $10,000. What can you offer me? Wharton say, okay, if Stanford offered you 10,000, we'll give you 10,000. And then you go back to Stanford, you're my number one. Wharton gave me 10. What could you do? They give you 15. Go to Wharton, they tell you, sorry, no dice. Then you have the choices, right, between the two. So you can negotiate funding as well. Now, I graduated, and I always say debt-free, but I really want to actually a humble brag that not only did I graduate debt-free, but I graduated with a profit. And the way that I did that is I taught classes on the undergrad campus. Some schools allow you to do that. Some schools don't care. You don't even have to ask. I taught classes at Berkeley, and that really helped me with tuition remission and a stipend. The summer jobs, we talked about summer work. So I worked during the summer. You've got your savings, right? Because you've been working for 2-3 years at a minimum, or your family can support you and you pay them back, or they just, help you out. And then budgeting, just be super smart. Don't overdo it, but also don't live like way out in the cuts just because you want to save money on rent. And then because you're so far away, you never end up going to class events because you're just so far out. I think it's funny at HBS, when I used to go there and had quite a few friends from the business school, they literally ate, slept, went to class, worked out, partied all in the same 1 kilometer radius, like half a mile radius. They just sat there and festered there and just did everything there. And they just really built that community there. I think somebody who lived like way outside would miss out on those opportunities. So sometimes you got to bite the bullet, but just be smart. Budget. Some people are like, I'm going to take out as much debt as I can because I want to do those student treks. I want to do all the activities. It pays back if you're smart about it. We got a question from Anna. When creating my resume, I do want to focus on adding everything to be catered towards business, or adding different experiences like art school, for example, can boost my profile since it will be more diverse. I love the question, Anna. Great question. Don't throw everything in the kitchen sink. You want to target it and you want to build a narrative that is substantiated by the core foundational document, which is your resume. If you start throwing everything out there and it's never mentioned in your essays, and it's just crazy left field and it just takes up space, it could be a distraction. But if you're like, but Hamad, I really want to talk about art school, even though I don't mention it in my application, but it really shows me as diverse and it doesn't take up a lot of space and it's not a distraction, I'll leave you to decide. But if you start throwing in everything and it just starts making you look schizophrenic in terms of goals and aspirations, I would hesitate and say, initially put your resume in terms of building a narrative. Then you can build on top of that these other aspects. Like, okay, I still have space. I'm going to, put in art school, or I'm going to talk about how I really did this different thing that doesn't have anything to do with it, or this random job or this random advisory role that I have. But I would say number one priority is build a narrative with the resume. And then try to find a home for everything in the application if it makes sense and flows within that narrative. And then if you have space and doesn't sound like a red herring and out of left field, then you can include that in the resume. But always try to keep things nice, tight, and creating a storyline. Imagine the resume is the script, and then the acting in the movie is the actual essays themselves, which go sometimes off script. I put that statistic in there. HBS gave about $43 million in student aid. Yes, HBS has a hell of a lot of money to give out. That's not systemic across all schools, but it does exist. So don't neglect that function. Oh, and a quick thing, and before I forget, most resumes should be maximum 2 pages. Don't make it 3, even if you have 15 years of experience. You really want to keep it within 2 solid, concise pages. Okay. I think that also helps you figure out how much to include and how much to exclude. All right. Part 2, which we're going to cover, I believe, later this week, we're going to be talking about the right story, which is so important because we're going to help you figure out how to write these essays and really let them stand out. We're going to talk about the submissions process itself, talk about the MBA interview, which we've done so many of them. We've really perfected that art, and we have a kind of system to do that. So check out the MBA, check that out, and so much more that we're going to be covering over part 2. So make sure to check that out. It's on Friday, and you just kind of click that link and be part of that. I really hope to see you there. Let me quickly tell you a little bit more about who we are in case you don't make it on Friday, just so you can get a sense of kind of how we did everything and how we put all this stuff together. We've been doing this. We got a 96% record across the board in terms of different programs. I would say within MBA programs, this one's for law school, but for MBA programs, I would say it's somewhere around 90%. 89 to 90%, because again, it is hard amongst the top 30, 40 business schools, but amongst the top 50, we have a very high success rate, 35%, 34 countries represented across the world: India, Bangladesh, Thailand, China, Russia, Egypt, the UAE. I mean, I can't tell you how many different clients from across the world. And for me, I love it. Why? I'm going to give a humble brag. I've got this little brand called Final50.world. I'm trying to travel to every country in the world. I love traveling. And because of that, I've basically trained my experts to have a very kind of diverse and open-minded opinion. I'm going to show you some of my experts now who are very, very international. And that really is important because a lot of MBAs are international. They're not just American. We've been doing this for 16 years. We've helped a lot of our clients get some financial aid, at least a little bit in terms of fellowships and financial aid. And what I really love is that we really help speed up the process. So I always say we really help you reduce the stress and increase your success of getting into these MBA programs, which for a lot of people is such an ease of mind because they're working so hard. They just don't have the time to think about the GRE or the GMAT and the letters and the essays and the timing and everything. We help you put it all together in terms of our services. Okay. And I will show you, like, we really have, as an exceptional team. Check out our website, righttrackadmissions.com/MBA, so you can check out our MBA specific programs. And as I said, if you hit us up after seeing both of the webinars, we'll give you this, our Oracle for free. So make sure to check out both webinars and then email us afterwards. info@righttrackadmissions.com. That's our email. That's our telephone number. Check us out on social media. And I look forward to seeing you on the next webinar on Friday. And that is with 2 minutes to spare, unless you have a quick question for me. And it looks like I am questioned out. So thank you guys for joining us. And we look forward to seeing you on Friday.